Welcome to the Millennial Sandwich, a space for real conversations about millennials in the middle, not just of our own lives, but also of a caregiving sandwich. I'm Dr. Anita and Zara, a geriatrician and expert in elder care.
And I'm Zara Hannawalt, a parenting journalist and expert in American motherhood. And even we don't have all the answers. Join us as we figure out life in the middle. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Today we're here with Bonnie Mangold. She is an attorney turned financial planner, and she's amazing. And she's going to give us so many great insights and so much good advice. So, Bonnie, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Zara. Happy to be here. Yeah, so I am a financial advisor. I was a practicing attorney for about 5 years before making the career change, and now I run a national financial planning practice. I work with clients in 44 states. So if you know anybody in the Dakotas, I'm looking to expand. Just kidding. But yeah, I just have such a passion for financial education. And, most of my clients are people who have historically been left out of these financial planning conversations. I love working with women and people of color and, members of the LGBTQ plus community. So yeah, I'm excited to be here and contribute to the conversation today.
Do you work mostly with millennials?
I work almost exclusively with millennials. I feel like in your late 20s, you want to start financial planning, but you don't actually do it until your 30s. And then I work with a couple stragglers in their 40s and 50s. I feel like if you were born around 1990, you're like my ideal client.
You are also a millennial, so you relate to the people you're helping. What are some of the financial stressors that you see when people are balancing, young kids and their careers? I'm assuming that's most of what you see.
Yeah, it's tough, right? So many people in our generation are trying to balance a really nice six-figure income, maybe for the first time in their 30s, but they also have six figures of student loans that they're working on as well. There's a lot of pressure from our parents' generation for us to be homeowners. So there's also that as well. And then you're still paying off your own student loans and then you're trying to start a fund for your kids. I mean, it can just be paralyzing thinking about all of those different elements.
I think so many millennials feel like we were lied to because most of us grew up in the 90s when economically things were very healthy in the United States. And so we were told that we can do anything. And we were fed all these messages like, find your dream job and you'll never work a day in your life. And now we're adults and we're like, but we can't afford houses. So,
And you
yeah.
mentioning the six-figure salary, when we were growing up and watching TV and movies, that was like the
The
goal that
beacon.
set
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
And that's not the case. Even just like surviving with children and a career and making six figures, like you said, is not the answer to all of our financial problems.
Yeah.
No, and I find with the rising costs of childcare too, I mean, I think back in the day when our parents were raising kids, right? Family maybe lived closer and family could help
Uh-huh.
out. I live across the country from my family, so I have to pay for childcare. And I think a lot of my clients are in a similar spot. And, so often I hear, okay, we'll start investing once our littlest is out of daycare, right? And then when the littlest is out of daycare, there's a whole new set of
Yeah.
expenses. And then, okay, then travel baseball, right? Like there's just
Uh-huh.
so much. Yeah.
So, like you said, everybody our age is talking about how we know we need to be doing something to prepare, but we don't know what we are supposed to be doing. So, where would you recommend even starting having any of these conversations?
When we think about financial planning, our mind immediately goes to offensive financial planning. Like what can I do to build wealth, to invest, right? To be able to not work until the day that I die, right? Offense. But what I encourage my clients to do is to think about financial planning from a defensive perspective first, because your offense is only as good as your defense. One of the first things that we talk through is building that emergency fund. Because if you don't have that little pot of cash sitting around, you're one financial disaster away from permanent financial disaster, and a job loss, an unexpected medical expense. Having that little cash cushion is going to be absolutely critical, especially as your life gets bigger. You own property, kids, you have aging parents, right? You're going to need some cash. Otherwise, you're going to turn to credit cards and the interest rates are absolutely disgusting. Or you're going to take a 401k loan and you're basically robbing your future self, right? So I think building up that cash cushion is probably the number one most important thing that I think. If you take anything away from today's conversation, having a little cash ready to roll is going to be absolutely
Any ways people can protect that cash cushion from like a tax perspective? Or is there anything we can do to kind of preserve that amount instead of losing a lot of it?
Yeah, so one of the big things that we worry about when holding cash is the eroding effects of inflation. So, one of the best places to keep that cash cushion is something called a high yield savings account. Usually they're online only. There's a couple that are associated with major banks, but the one that I typically recommend is called Marcus by Goldman Sachs. There's other ones. There's one through Amex, which is great. But basically, they just pay you 3.5% interest for holding your money there, which inflation is about 3.5%. So
Mhm.
you're basically just treading water. If you keep it in your checking account, you're going backwards. So the high yield savings account's the best place, at least for now. Some people think, oh, well, I can just have it invested in something safe like the S&P 500. Well, it goes down. And you don't want to hope that your emergency coincides with good markets. Usually it doesn't. So having some cash, at least on the sidelines, in that high yield savings account is going to be smart.
Yeah, I gotta say, I don't know most of the words you're saying.
I was just thinking that. I was just
And
like,
yeah, and I like we are educated women, we're in our late 30s, and unless we have someone like you, Bonnie, we really don't even know the basics of where to start. I know, when I talk to my friends about what we're doing with our money, none of us really know. Many people are talking about how to save up for college or school for your kids. Would you say your clients are also thinking about the other end of things, which is with your parents and helping them with any of this? So I feel like I don't really even know what I'm doing with my own money. So how will I help my parents when they inevitably will need, some guidance? I see it on the other end with my older adult patients who, need long-term care or they're worried about how to pay for extra care in the home. Many people don't live in the same area as their children and their children want to help. How can we kind of balance both of these things and what would you recommend? What kind of conversation should we be having on both ends of the spectrum?
Yeah, no, and I think that's a really important question because there's just not much education around financial literacy in this country. And I didn't grow up learning about this stuff. I had to spend 6 months of my life studying this and passing exams just to know what I know. It's the experience over the last 8 years has really helped expand my knowledge. But yeah, you're not alone in feeling feeling that way. What I see frequently is my millennial clients, they do not want to repeat the same patterns that their parents have repeated, whether that's not planning for long term care, not saving for retirement, not funding their personal education, right? And so
mhm.
there's a lot of thoughts around breaking the generational cycle with my millennial clients. So one of the things that I remind them is you can't borrow for your own retirement. And the best way to not pass down financial insecurity to the next generation is to be financially secure in and of yourself, right? Because if you're not financially secure, guess what? The same generational pattern is going to repeat itself. And so oftentimes there's not a lot we can do if our parents are not open to the conversation. For some reason, boomers don't want to talk about money, right? It's so
Yeah.
private. And I think our generation is kind of coming out of that. We don't necessarily know what to talk about, but we want to talk about it.
Mhm.
Because it's really putting the burden on us.
Mhm.
We want to be able to be there for them and help them and make sure that they're comfortable and safe. But if we're not even part of the conversation, I wouldn't even know. If I wouldn't even know where to start. I actually, it took my dad dying for my mom to even start the conversation about like, hey, like my dad had nothing in place, didn't it wasn't expected, but like you said, these things happen. That was kind of the impetus for my mom being kind of open to letting me into some of the stuff that's happening. It's hard to take over somebody's finances after the fact when you can't ask them questions, and I don't want to do that again. I don't want anyone else to be in that situation where when something happens before they start this conversation. So how can we approach our aging parents about what should we even ask them?
I think that's a really important conversation that is made difficult by the shame associated
Mhm.
with money. I think for a lot of us, money isn't just a currency. There's emotion tied to it, right? There's shame,
Yeah.
there's embarrassment, there's I coulda, shoulda,
Pride.
woulda, pride, right? Money is success in a lot of families, right? And
Mhm.
so I think recognizing that it's not just, oh, mom and dad, tell me about your finances. It's not just
Yeah.
dollars and cents. Decision making and accountability. There's just so much wrapped up in it. To answer your question, I would start with the least intrusive pieces first. Perhaps a very intrusive piece would be like, let me take a look at your 401k, right? That'd be very intrusive. Perhaps maybe you say, have you put a healthcare directive in place? Like, who's calling the shots if you can't make your
Yeah.
own medical decisions, right? Pretty light touch. And if they're like, well, we don't have that, well, let me refer you to an attorney. And then the attorney's not going to let them leave without a healthcare directive, a will, a trust, a power of attorney, right? Then you kind of pass the buck to that professional. I would start with the lighter touch, less intrusive topics to really get the ball rolling on that.
When I see people in the hospital, they'll say, well, my mom always said that she never wants us to put her in a facility or a nursing facility. Okay, so what what's the alternative to that?
Yeah.
And the conversations that happen downstream from that haven't happened, and that's really tough because in the system that we live in, that translates to money. If you
Mhm.
are trying to not use insurance or not use government assistance when you're sick, is there are your finances in place to support that?
Yeah, and there's a lot of different ways that in today's day and age we can start to get ahead of long-term care planning. I have so many of my clients who are using some of their own disposable income to pay for long-term care insurance for mom and dad because they know that okay, 500 bucks a month for long-term care insurance sucks. It's the last thing you want, but if they're not going to do it themselves, which is often the case because they don't need it or, oh, it won't happen to me or, oh, don't be such a downer, right? Like,
Mhm.
whatever the reason, they'd rather pay that than know that down the road, if something happens, they're going to be out the door for a lot more money than that.
And what about on the other end for our kids? In order to set them up for success, what do you recommend to your clients? What should we be doing at this age?
Nothing. You got to work on yourself. You cannot
Interesting.
borrow for retirement. You can borrow for kids' college. You can borrow for home ownership. You can borrow for all sorts of things. You cannot borrow for your own retirement. So I always tell parents, we don't need to start with these fancy 529 accounts. We don't need to retire my baby. I don't know if you guys have heard that. There's so many things that are sensationalized on social media about ways to set your kid up. You set your kid up by not becoming a burden. So you set yourself up. And then once you know that you are properly on track to not be a burden, then you can talk about the fun, fancy stuff. But just get yourself in order. That's the best thing you can do for your
Such a
kids.
good perspective that you're right. On social media, I feel like I'm always seeing like, this is what you should do to, have your kid be financially independent by whatever age, but
Mhm.
nobody is saying take care of yourself first. And yeah, so tell us more about that. I feel like Zara and I are both mind blown just by hearing.
I was totally expecting you to, like, tell us all to start 529s for our
Yeah.
kids. Yeah.
No, I mean, and what a millennial perspective to put ourselves last, right? It never even crosses our mind
Totally.
to be like, oh,
Yeah.
let me take care of myself, right? Like, what a millennial perspective. And that's the thing. I think it too. We're so self-sacrificial, especially millennial
Yeah.
moms. We're like parenting our children, parenting our parents, parenting our own inner child. We're in it. So I'm not surprised that you had that reaction because most people don't think of it that way. But yeah, I mean, the best thing you can do for yourself is not have your child like again, think about it super morbidly, right? If I don't plan for my kids' college, but I'm not moving in with them, depending on them, having them be my retirement plan, having them be my long-term care plan, that's a win in and of itself. And if I can put legal documents in place for myself, if I can start again, my kids are super little, and I know you guys have little kids too, but what I'm encouraging my clients who have teenagers is to do a quarterly family financial meeting. Say, "Hey, kids," and you can share as much or as little as you want. Put together a binder of, "These are all of my usernames and passwords for all of my
Mm.
bank accounts," because you might be legally entitled to the money, but if you can't log in, now you're on the phone
Yes.
with tech support after your
Do
loved one
that.
dies. I mean, what a
It's
disaster.
been 2 years since my dad died, and I'm still trying to log into things that he never shared with me, so, yeah, I definitely agree that that's something we should all be doing. It's probably stuff that they never thought about because that wasn't a thing when they were I mean, maybe this won't be a
Yeah.
thing when we're older, who knows, but sharing, I think what you're getting at is that we should be more open with the next generation and not have them feel like they just need to guess when they're taking care of us.
You guys heard of a If I Die binder?
Mhm. What do
Do
you
you
think
like
about
that
that?
idea? It's a binder full of all the information your family, kids, spouse, whoever needs in case you die unexpectedly. So it's like passwords, it's financial information, it's I don't know what else you would put in there, but
Yeah,
basically
Bonnie,
all that relevant information.
what would you put in the binder that you're
Yeah. So it's funny because what I tell my clients in your if I die binder, put my name and email address, right? Because I've been working with them for years. I know exactly where
Yeah.
everything is. I have all of the updated information. So I think get a financial advisor, get a comprehensive, holistic financial advisor who can handle all of this. I mean, knock on wood, God forbid, I have not had a client pass away in my 8 years of practice, but it's coming. I know it will happen. And I tell all my clients, like, hey, I want to meet your kids. I want to
Mhm.
have a relationship with your kids, with your parents, right? Generational financial planning can be a great way to delegate all of the work to someone, just to a professional, right? I mean, it's kind of like an event planner,
Yeah.
right? Like, why do I need to have the number of the florist and the number of the lighting person? Just say, call Anita. Right?
or a doctor, right? That's the kind of same kind of thing. Like they know you, had this longitudinal relationship with you. They know your history. They know what you're sensitive to and what you're not. It's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, because we don't need another to-do item on our list, right? I don't want
Yeah.
listeners to leave and be like, "Oh, great, so now I need to make this whole binder, and I gotta make a binder for my
Yeah.
parents because they're not gonna treat
Mhm.
themselves either."
I mean, that's why I haven't done that. I would love to do all of these things, I think, and it's just like you said, it's another task to do. And then I feel like whenever I talk about we do have a financial planner, and when I talk to my friends who don't, one of the reasons they're hesitant is that, well, you end up paying for something I could do myself. How would you respond to somebody who might be hesitant because of the finances associated with getting a financial planner?
Yeah, I mean, how many things do you pay for that you could do yourself? Like, I'm not gonna highlight my own hair. I mean, I could, right? I, at a certain point, have people help me with my landscaping and
Yeah.
the luxuries of a house cleaner, right? Like, I could, right? I could spend every Saturday cleaning my house top to bottom, but then why? Why? What's my
Yeah.
highest and best use? And I think the sooner we can accept that we do not need to be masters of everything, and the more we can delegate, the better. And plus, I can share this with clients, but you have to feel it, right? Money is very emotional. And when markets start doing weird things, you start acting like a weirdo, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I have a financial advisor because I start acting like a weirdo with my own money.
Mhm.
There's that emotional regulation. It's kind of like a personal trainer, right? Like you
Yeah.
can go to the gym and do some push ups, but are you going to? Maybe not as many.
I also think that especially boomers in the United States had such a distaste for outsourcing and they kind of passed that on to their kids. I feel like that is still such a taboo and still something people are trying to get past.
Yeah, it's almost like you're admitting that you can't do it all, and therefore
Yeah.
there's failure and shame associated with that, which maybe, right? But who cares?
Yeah.
So, Bonnie, you are sort of exactly who our listeners probably are. So, you
Yeah.
are in your 30s, you have young children, you have parents who are older. What are you doing for your finances? Tell us kind of what that looks like because maybe that will resonate with who might be looking for what to do.
Yes, I'm 37. I've got a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. My parents live across the country. They're both semi-retired, which again, I don't even know exactly what that means. I've got 2 siblings and, we're all at different phases of life. So, yeah, I think
You're the
you're right.
firstborn.
Yeah, oh, firstborn daughter, yeah, I was like my daughter is the firstborn daughter and granddaughter. I'm like, "Good luck, girl." But, yeah, so, I mean, in terms of what I'm doing financially, I'm slowly becoming more and more curious about my parents' financial planning, asking, again, very light touch questions, getting them thinking about things that we should be thinking about really just starting the dialogue, right? Because my parents are in their upper 60s. So they're still relatively young. I mean, in today's day and age, right? And I'm basically just trying to get myself financially stable and secure, knowing that, say, the next 10 years, my kids are going to need a lot of money from me, and perhaps my parents might as well. So, working on paying down debt, working on my personal budgeting, because if I can live very securely within my means and I'm doing saving and investing now when I don't have those financial commitments, 5 years from now, if I have to shut off all of my saving and investing and use that surplus for supporting family, I have the compounding effect of the work that I did in years prior. And I'm not living right up to my means that I have that
Mhm.
cushion. So I think a lot of it is just starting to put the habits in place of living within your means, saving and investing a little bit monthly, annually, depending on how you're paid. And then starting to get curious about what your parents have and haven't done. Again, not that you can do anything about it. I mean, I
But
could have.
knowledge is like half of it, right? Just knowing what
Mhm.
situation you're gonna be walking into is
Mhm.
so helpful when you're not walking in blind. Like, I have no idea what their situation is.
Yeah, and also I mean, I haven't done this yet, but I need to talk to my siblings, see what information they're mining from mom and dad,
And I wonder
right?
how much they're even thinking about any of this. As you said, you're the eldest daughter. Maybe they haven't thought. I mean, it's I guess important to have that conversation. I've never talked to my brother about this.
Yeah, yeah.
And Zara's an only. It's all different situations. So, do you have a 529 for your kids?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I opened up the 529 with the thought of when I get gifts for the kids, I'll ask for money and I'll say, "Hey, let's put it in their 529." I mean, even if it's like $20, like I'll just earmark it and be like, "All right, let's put it in their 529." So, admittedly, I haven't put a ton of my own money into their 529s, but having the vehicle available, because look, if you don't have a 529 and you get $20 for your kid, you're not going to be like, "Okay, this is the impetus to sit
Yeah.
down and figure out how to open a 529," right? You're going to be like, "Okay, let's just, put it on the counter."
So
Yeah.
it sounds like you're saying don't earmark some of your own income or whatever money is coming in to you to go directly to the kids, but anything that's coming to them in terms of gifts or kind of extra things, that makes sense to go into the 529. But you're whatever money is coming to you or whatever money you're making should be you should focus first on getting yourself in a good financial position and not putting it directly towards the kids.
Yeah, exactly. And just to kind of give some framework around what it means to yourself be in a good financial position, right? You should have 3 months worth of your living expenses in cash in that high yield savings account. You should have, from a defensive perspective, you should have insurance, life insurance in case you pass away prematurely. You should have disability insurance in case you get sick or hurt and can't work. You should have some legal planning documents in place. And then to be on track for retirement, 20% of what you're making pre tax should be going away for the future. So if you make 100 grand, 20 grand going away for the future. And if you're not doing that, you have no business thinking about saving for education or anything else, really. That is what it's going to take to be financially secure in and of yourself. And so if that's all you could ever focus on, great. You're doing the next generation a huge gift by at least doing.
There's so much talk about owning a home with our
Mhm.
generation and coming from the boomer generation. And for a lot of us, that just doesn't make sense in today's world. What do you say to people who think their goal is to own a home? Does that always make sense?
It's tough, right? Because there's such an emotional value placed on home ownership, right? There's not a dollar value in a lot of cases. It's an emotional piece of the puzzle. It's definition of success or stability. I've had so many clients like, I don't want to start having children until we're in our home, right? I hear that all the
Mm.
time. Financially, it doesn't always make sense. I mean, when you think about it surface level and you read about it on TikTok, it's like, why would I pay someone else's mortgage, right? Like, why would I
Yeah.
rent? I'm lighting the money on fire. Uh huh, you are. But would you rather do that and then not be on the hook for that $15,000 home repair, right? Because you don't have enough emergency savings? Would you rather be in a spot where you can maybe live in a place that's a little bigger and a little nicer than you can afford to own?
Mhm.
Right, there's no right answer, and that's why I think you need a professional to kinda dive into that with you and do the individual analysis, because when you just look at the mass publications or the mass information on this, you're missing the nuanced perspective that comes with taking a deep dive.
Speaking of home ownership, I think that most people, when they start to think about buying a home, they have no idea how to set a budget. I know that we didn't. Like, we really had no idea how much we could actually budget for our home because nobody really gives you a formula for that. Do you have any guidelines around like how much money you have versus how much you can spend on a home? Any kind of frameworks like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, there's 2 things to think about. Number 1, how much cash can I part with for down payment, closing costs? And then how much can I sustain monthly? And those are often 2 related points, right? Because the more you put down, the less it is monthly, but then the more you put down, the less money you actually just have.
Mhm.
And there's no universal rule because I have clients who live in New York City. And if I say, "Oh, don't spend more than, 20-25% on housing," they're like, "Okay."
Mhm.
Right? And then, I have clients in Des Moines who one of my clients there, she just bought this dream home she built from scratch, and I think it's like 4% of her income.
Yeah.
It's
So those
really challenging.
calculators don't always work for everybody.
No, no, not at all. And
Yeah.
I always tell people, you have to either decide, are you the person who is comfortable with maybe extending yourself a little bit more to get into the house where you're going to stay for the next 20 years and, 5 years from now it's going to feel super comfortable? Or are you the person who's like, look, I don't want to be house poor. I don't want to think about the fact that I have a mortgage payment. Like, let's just get something that's affordable and maybe not my dream house, but I can sleep at night knowing that I never think about the mortgage.
I think so we talked a little bit about how to talk to our parents about their financial situation with my husband and I feel like every once in a while I'm like we really need to be better about communicating about our finances and thinking about what we're looking at, in 10 years, 20 years. And it like at one point I put in the calendar every 2 weeks we're going to do a check-in. We've never done it. because it seems like I get that feeling. I'm like, "Oh, man, that's gonna be like a whole thing, and I'm gonna be stressed out, and I don't wanna do that." What do you recommend? Like, how should we be talking to our partners or whoever we're kinda sharing this financial, venture with? What do you recommend? How do we have these conversations with them, and what do we even talk about? That's
Yeah, right, and that's I can relate so personally to that because it's like, "I haven't seen you all week. Let's fight about money. Let's do that."
right. That's like the
Yeah.
last thing that I wanna do. I just wanna, like, watch TV and pretend that this none of this exists.
Yeah.
Exactly. 2 ideas on that. First is if you that's one of the benefits of having a financial planner, right? I force my clients to sit down and talk about this with me twice a year. And you're much more likely to not cancel on me, but you'll cancel on your spouse, right? But
Yeah.
it's like, "Oh, we have an appointment with Bonnie or whomever." And then that professional can lead the conversation slash mediate the conversation. You're not gonna full out brawl with your spouse when I'm sitting there, right? Like, you might whisper at each other, but you're not gonna, like, get into it. So I think that's a really helpful format. And I think also too, second thought on that would be a great way to start talking about money is to not talk about money. And what I mean by that is start talking about your goals. Money's just a tool, right? Money is just a tool to get you what you want. So figuring out, hey, do we have alignment on what we want? Is private school something that's going to be important? We'll talk about the money later, but is private school important? Right? Is joining a particular club, is that important? Is taking a international family vacation, is that important? And I think having a conversation about those things, right? Everything requires money. So you're talking about money, but you're not really talking about money. And so I think once you can get some alignment around the household goals, short, medium, long-term goals, then you can start to say, all right, well, if we're spending X, Y, and Z dining out each month, how is that getting us closer to the goals that we just talked about? And maybe one of your goals is we need to have a weekly date night. And if that's your goal, then dining out budget makes perfect sense.
Mhm.
But if that's not something that's important and it's just kind of happening, it might be a great point in the conversation to say, hey, you know what, maybe we reallocate that toward our vacation fund because we just talked about how important it is to do that. So I think talking about what the money would be used for is a lot easier than talking about the money itself.
And when those conversations happen around extended family and supporting parents and each other's parents, there's so much other like emotion and other things that go into that conversation. Do your clients tell you about what their plans are for helping their parents or other family? How does that typically work?
When I develop a relationship with a client, I mean, we talk about all of this stuff. I mean, we even talk about their illegal drug budget. We talk about everything, right? Like we have all the cards on the table because we're in a confidential environment. And sometimes giving tithing to the church is important. So that's budgeting. Sometimes supporting family back home is important and we have to weave that in. And what I often tell couples is that you're probably not going to align perfectly on the level of support that you want to provide for each other's extended family. So maybe that's an opportunity to start a little discretionary. You don't have to have all finances one big pot. In fact, most of my clients don't have their finances that way. And so maybe if each of you has a discretionary pot, that could be for shoes, that could be for supporting family. You get to choose.
That's another thing that I think is very millennial is making this decision about how to approach finances in a marriage. Like I feel like most of us grew up with parents who just shared everything and now we're trying to figure out what works best for us. Do you think that more millennials are sharing finances with their partners or do you think more of them are separating?
I would say that most people take a hybrid approach. I very rarely see the one big pot mentality, especially
Mhm.
because a lot of millennial couples are dual income households. And there's a lot more autonomy than in prior generations with regard to finances. Usually there's one big pot for shared expenses, household expenses, kid expenses. Obviously retirement accounts are separate because they have to be through work or whatever. But I would say the vast majority of clients that I work with, they have their own bank accounts too.
Do you think that's the way to go?
So I always tell people if what you're doing right now is working, just do that. Just do that. If it's not working, I can give you 100 different examples of what other clients are doing and you can try those on for size. But if what you're doing is working or even sort of working, sometimes people are like, oh, I have my savings account and, we treat it as mutual, but do I need to go and add my spouse's name? No, that's an administrative task that you just don't need to be dealing with. Like, if the mindset is that it's communal, the mindset is that it's communal.
That's so great to hear. Actually, just even hearing just saying like don't add more to your list and this is not like
Mm,
the list that you need to have or like the exact formula you need to have because I always think I'm sure there's something different I should be doing or could be doing, but like you said if it's working, it's
yeah.
working. What does your household look like? Can you tell us more about the
No.
structure?
Yeah, so when my husband and I started our relationship, we were both working as attorneys and we made roughly similar income. So we came into the relationship as roughly 50-50 earners. And over the years, the dynamic financially has shifted such that I am the only earner in the household. And, you know, emotional work aside, right, from a financial planning perspective, it can really take a toll on a marriage if you don't talk about it, right? Because just because one person makes the money, does that mean that they have more control, right? Just because one person makes the money, does that mean that they get to decide allowance for the other? Or does their vote count for more because they're the one making the money? Again, there's no right or wrong answer. I think there are some couples who are like, yeah, damn straight. Right? And other couples are like, no, we respect each other as equal partners and whoever, you know, brings home the money, that's just their role. And the person who doesn't bring home the money, they're contributing in non-monetary ways or even in monetary ways. Like if you have a spouse who cares for children, right, there's a cost savings associated with that. If you have a spouse who
Yeah.
does grocery shopping, you're not paying DoorDash, like you can get really technical about it, but I think you have to understand that there will be different phases in life where you're both earning. One person's earning, the other person's earning. Neither of you is earning, right? And I think that you have to decide and do some work, maybe not with a financial planner, maybe more of like a mental health professional around how you want that dynamic to be. Because as a financial planner, I can design it however you want it, but you have to tell me how you want it.
What about obviously, we are in a really unstable job market right now. Is there anything you would suggest people do to lay off proof their finances?
No, I mean, it's the emergency fund. The standard wisdom on that is 3 months of living expenses. But I have clients who have been laid off from really high paying tech jobs that it takes them 18 months to find another job. And so that 3 months, that's worthless. I mean, it's nice, but am I going to tell everyone, oh, keep 18 months worth of cash sitting in an account that's barely pacing with inflation just to make sure that if you do get laid off and it does last 18 months, you're fine, right? Like it's tough. It's really, really tough. And I think we can put some mechanisms in place to make sure that you're not completely, out on the street, but we can't we can't think like that because I think that scarcity mentality is very much from prior generations. And I think we need to approach it with more of an abundance mentality, even though it's a little scary out there.
Yeah.
Someone listening right now feels financially stressed in, all directions. What are some practical steps they can take now to kind of feel more in control and getting on the right track?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the first things that I would suggest would be just write down all the money that's coming in the door and all the money that's going out the door and just write it down or put it in Excel or whatever. Just seeing your entire financial life in one spot mentally just helps you get your mind around, okay, this isn't that scary. It's all on one page. Okay. Then what would be a next step would be, okay, let's list all the places where I have money. List all the bank accounts. List all the old retirement accounts that might be floating out there with old employers, right? List all of the debts that you have. We owe money on the car, we owe money on the house, we owe this, that, right? Student loans, put it all there. So now you have one page that is cash flow in and out, one page that is a statement of net worth, essentially what you have and what you don't have, right? What you owe. And I think once you have that in front of you, you can start to look a little bit more objectively and less emotionally because now you're just looking at numbers. And if you're pouring your heart out into all of these different pieces of the puzzle and then simultaneously trying to analyze it, it's going to be so overwhelming. Get it all out there, put
Yeah.
it on paper, take a step back, and then look at the numbers, right? Digest the numbers. And I think all the while, give yourself some grace to realize that it's not always going to be like this. It's not always going to be this intense and this stressful. And you're not alone. So many of us, no matter how much money you're making, you never feel like you're making quite enough, right? There's always, oh, I can make a little bit more and that would make things a lot easier. Yeah, I hear that from everybody.
Yeah, and I feel like once you get those systems up and running, it's probably so much less daunting.
hmm It is. Yeah. Nobody likes to start with a blank piece of paper. So if anything, Google around and get like, hey, budget template, or like have chat GPT prep something for you. So you're not
Yeah.
looking at a blank sheet of paper because that can be really intimidating starting from scratch.
Well, millennials also got a lot of advice like the reason you can't afford a house is because you're buying avocado toast and lattes every day. Do you think there's any truth at all to that? Or do you think that's just really bad advice?
So I think that that's very good advice if you are living paycheck to paycheck. But if you are making a healthy income, and let's just say you're making $500,000 as a household, really? It's not- If you're making 70,000, yeah, we got to be really conscious of that stuff because that can make or break, right? An extra $300 a month is going to
Yeah.
be really impactful. $300 a month when you're netting 25,000 a month? Get out of here.
Yeah. It is interesting though, because I think millennials have so many convenience expenses like the Uber Eats and the Instacart
Mhm.
and the streaming services and all of that stuff that I probably feel like we should be talking about more than lattes and avocado toast. But
The
that
whole,
doesn't
like,
really seem to be,
treating yourself, you just feel like, "It's fine, I'm just treating myself. I deserve
huh?
this. I earned this."
Yeah.
Just tell clients that, once we get through the basics, right? We've got the budget, we've got the defensive planning pieces in place. We're working on some of the retirement offensive pieces. What we might weave in is a budget line item called a fun fund. And it is a pot of money that you add to every month. And that is how much you have to do stuff like that. Right. So you can feel free and go wild knowing that you have, $800 in there, right? Do your thing,
Hmm.
right? Go crazy,
Yeah.
spend the money because we're purposely budgeting for it. I think it starts to feel a little bit unmanageable when it's just a free for all. I think as long as we are intentional, and if you have a spouse, get intentional about this. Like, hey, how much do we prioritize comfort and convenience? Are we a household who really prioritizes that? Okay, fine. Uber Eats is consistent with our goals, right? Back to what I was saying. Set your goals, right? If you're not a comfort and convenience person, then reprioritize your spending in other areas. But if you are, then you're spending in line with your goals, and that's okay.
Can I ask you some rapid fire questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Alright. So rapid fire, what is the biggest financial mistake millennials make?
There are so many. I would say the biggest is spending too much on credit cards.
One thing every family should have in place by age 40.
emergency fund.
Is well, you kinda answered this one already, but is college saving overrated or essential?
Overrated. Yeah, overrated.
Alright, and should millennials be worrying about long-term care insurance yet?
No, no.
One financial conversation everyone should have with their parents this year.
I would love them to have a whole bunch of things, but if you're just to have one, I would start prodding on the legal planning side of things.
And then this doesn't have to be rapid fire, it's kind of a big question, but are millennials doomed financially?
Are we chopped?
That's a tough one because there are so many things that are working against us, right? Taxes are going up. Social Security is not waiting for us in the same ways, right? We don't have pensions like prior generations did. To make ends meet, we need two earners typically in a household. Most of us are still working on our own student loans while also paying for daycare and all sorts of stuff. Are we doomed? No. But can we have our cake and eat it too? No. We have to prioritize. We can't have everything. We can't have the big house and fully fund kids' college and take European vacations every summer and retire at 55. I think prior generations could get away with some of that bullshit, but I think for us, if we can have a couple of those, I think that would be a huge win.
And also and family planning. I feel like this doesn't get talked about when we talk about having however many kids. Do you want another kid? It's all about like, I don't feel done. I don't know. I always
Yeah.
imagined a bigger family. And for us, we like nice things. We like traveling. We like to love our house. I love my bags. That's just actually did go into, I felt selfish saying that, but like the lifestyle we want to live does not allow for another child. Does that go into your conversations?
Absolutely. I mean, the middle child is becoming an extinct creature. People are family planning with finances in mind, and especially the families that need to use assisted reproductive technology, they start in the home, right? Because health
For sure.
insurance isn't covering everything. So let's just say baby comes into the world, you're negative $10,000. So should you start a 529 plan? No, no, right? No. So I think money, for better or for worse, has to be a part of those conversations.
Yeah, I think we're just starting to talk about that. Like I'm seeing people say that a third child is like a Birkin. Have you seen that
I have
conversation?
not.
It's like having 3 kids is like the ultimate status symbol.
It's so true. I don't know, nobody really talks about that. I just every time I'm having a conversation about, people are always asking like, "Oh, do you want another? Do you want?" Well, no, because it's so expensive and nobody just says no because it's expensive. I would love to have another child, but it's really expensive to have another child. Even from one,
Yeah.
you were talking about how hard it is day to day, but it's just it's another child is very expensive. I can't afford another child with my current lifestyle.
I think the 2 to 3 is like the prime millennial inflection point where we like to travel, and it's a lot easier to travel when you have 2 parents and 2 kids. We give our kids really individualized attention. It's harder to do that when you're outnumbered. And like Bonnie, like you mentioned, we would have loved a 3rd kid, but we are not super fertile. And we had to make that decision of, okay, we'll try for a little while. And if it doesn't happen, we're not going to go back to assisted reproduction like we did with our twins. So, yeah, there's just a lot tied up in it. And this is a little bit of a tangent, but I feel like we need to stop asking people if they're having another kid.
Yeah.
Kids at all. Like
Yeah.
just don't ask that.
Yeah. A lot.
How do you know if you can afford another kid? I mean, I have expensive taste and I am
Yeah.
self-aware, but like how do you know?
I think for a lot of people, it's looking at the cost of childcare, right? Adding another kid to daycare, having the nanny stay on for an additional 2 years. Hey, does this mean now the cost of daycare is more than one parent's after tax income, right? Like that's the math that we usually start with. And we don't usually get beyond that.
And then there's like a whole conversation of, well, if I've budgeted for child one and two's education and whatever it is, I have to do the exact same for the next kid. I
Yeah.
mean, there's so much of that that goes into, I think, especially moms, we're thinking about 30 years down the line, like, I need to give all of this to all of my children the exact same, and how will I show up for them in X, Y, and Z ways?
Yeah, and I gotta tell you guys, I've been sitting down with so many millennial couples who are intentionally not having children, more
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
than ever before. It's it's something that is usually lifestyle or financially related. So, it's tough that, the metrics by which we have to make decisions comes back to money, right? They say money doesn't buy
Mhm.
happiness. Well, money buys choices, optionality, flexibility. Um, it's not the end all be all, but it does make things a little bit easier.
Yeah.
What would you say is your millennial sandwich survival tip?
Survival tip: focus on number one, focus on yourself. Because if you are secure financially in and of yourself, you can give to others, whether that's up or down, right? And I think I saw on your social, like, you cannot pour from an empty cup. It's like, right. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying
Mhm.
make sure that you are financially secure. And then you have the decision. Do I want to help in this way? Do I want to help in that way? And maybe it's not a choice. Maybe it's I must help. But at least at that point, you're not passing that down to kids that, hey, mom and dad are not financially secure. That that's a generational problem that continues extremely easily unless you intentionally nip it in the bud. And it feels selfish. It feels really selfish and it feels antithetical to the type of person that you want to be at times, but we have to do it. Again, says the self-sacrificial mom. Like, I'm like, oh, this is so icky. But when you look at the math and you look at the outcomes, that's what we have to do. We have to be secure ourselves.
Amazing. Thank you, Bonnie. I feel like you have reframed a lot of this for me. I wouldn't say I understand anything about money still. It's going to be a separate venture for me to learn things, but just saying focus on your own situation. We don't as moms and daughters, we do not hear that enough to
Mhm.
focus
Yeah.
on yourself first, and that's okay, and that's actually helping up and down. So important. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure.
Where can people find you?
So I can be reached over email, first name dot last name, Bonnie.mangold at nm.com. You can also find me on social. You can find me on my firm's website, amicusfp.com, Amicus Financial Partners. Yeah, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help. And all initial conversations are complimentary. So we'll see if it makes sense to spend more time together before getting into anything formal.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Yeah.